I've got a lot of explaining to do, haven't I? It's been a hot minute, and it's been quite an interesting hot minute. Where to begin? I don't have a script. This is completely unscripted, and I'm just going for whatever I feel like is right to say. So, I went through a very bad artistic drought. And it was the kind of artistic drought that took it out of me quite a lot. Your typical artistic drought are ones where you don't draw for a while, you don't want to do anything creative, and you just feel like relaxing, being yourself, and just doing other things outside of art. Whereas this artistic drought, for me, went down a very, very, very deep rabbit hole. But I'll make another video separate from that. But in the meantime, this is, after all, the last video of my Darksiders project, which I am super, super happy that I was able to finish, despite everything that I've just previously said that has happened. But it's taken a while, longer than it should have, but we got there in the end. Which is all that really matters, I suppose, doesn't it? It doesn't matter how long it took, it doesn't matter when it was finished. All that matters is that I was able to finish it in relatively good time. But here's that video that you've been looking forward to, been wanting to see, and yeah, this is the final result. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. From the last video that I made, I was showing you and demonstrating what I do when drawing or colouring a character that I'm creating, how I render it using Procreate, all the tips, tricks, thought processes, and etc, etc. If you're not sure what I said or spoke about, you can go and find my previous video and you can refresh your memory on what it is that I spoke of. But for now, I'm going to talk about a bit more in depth as to what happened from that point onward. And let me tell you something, a lot seriously changed. When I mean a lot in such a short span of time. The hardest part was trying to render the character first. The rest wasn't too bad. Still experimentative, still testing things. But it was at this point when I noticed or tried other methods to not hasten my work necessarily, but to give the same effect in a shorter span of time, or using methods that would give an effect that was appealing to me, which yielded a better result, which took less time to do it than what I did with my death piece. Now, I've been drawing and rendering characters for many years now, and something that I've noticed greatly is that sometimes more detail is too much. You need to know a stopping point, basically. At the end of the day, all artists understand this issue of knowing a stopping point. It's so easy to fall into this constant rhythm of wanting to improve to the point where you overcomplicate it. I can't speak. To the point where you overcomplicate your drawing. So much so that there's just too much going on. Your eyes get confused. You start losing the point as to what you were trying to create. When you create something, you have to reflect on why you're creating it and what effect you desire to have from it. At the end of the day, if you can't even do something as simple as that, then it is a lost effort. It is a lost cause, and you have lost your way. It's tough, very tough, to know that stopping point. But once you know it, you have more control over when that stopping point should be. And if anything, you save yourself a lot of time. You are giving the same yield, you are producing the same quality of work, but your speed and knowledge and application of this particular field has been hastened, has been quickened, has been developed enough to the point where you can say, I can produce the same quality of work in a lesser time period. That's what all great artists try to do. They try to hasten their speed, they try to progress faster through their work, and by doing so, they're able to create masterpieces that they would do normally, previously, taking them many hours, but now only taking them several minutes, or maybe even an hour, depending on what it is. When we all love it if we took several minutes to create a piece. From start to finish, that would be sublime. That'd be fantastic. But a lot of individuals, including myself sometimes, don't realize how long it takes for an artist to develop and hone these skills. It takes an extreme amount of time, many years, many hours, many attempts, failed and succeeded, to reach a point of where they are the most happiest or the most pleased with their outcome. Now, in this time lapse, and I apologize that this time lapse is of a lesser quality, but I have resolved that issue. So the next time I do a time lapse on Procreate, I've heightened rather the resolution. So hopefully this issue shouldn't happen again. But it's at this point from around about the 28-minute mark in this time lapse. By the way, this time lapse is 30 minutes long. However, it's probably taken me many days, weeks, possibly a month or close to it. But I would say probably if I were to work every single day from 9 till 5, your normal working shift, it probably would have taken me about 2 weeks. From the very beginning when I digitally inked my Darksiders piece all the way to the very end. So it took a lot of time. But from the 28-minute mark of this time lapse was the fastest, from rendering dust and even the scythe of death as well as the mist. This took the least amount of time, and it was the quickest. Now, I originally tried to do the same cell shading that I did on dust, rather on death for dust, but it didn't really work out. And this is actually a prime example of when to know where to stop, when it's becoming too complicated. I didn't want that cell shaded effect on dust, because even though his feathers are very intricate, they're very separate and they're very detailed, by cell shading each individual feather, it makes the piece more complicated. If I were to have carried on the way I did previously for dust, I can guarantee you that it probably would have drawn your attention more to the crow than it would to of death. Another reason why the cell shading route wouldn't have worked is purely for the fact of the surface area and the space of each feather was way too small. It's like trying to cram all the details of a building into a diorama or a small scale of it. It's extremely difficult. You can do it, but the problem with that is you tend to overcomplicate it. So you need something that still resembles the texture and the detail of said object or said creature or said structure, without rendering every single bit of detail. The bigger the surface, the easier it is to put detail in without overcomplicating it, which is why for Death I was able to cell shade it properly. A bigger figure, well, more presence on the piece itself, and so I was able to be more intricate because I had more room to do so. Whereas on Dust, the crow, I had less room to do it, and it would have just overcomplicated it to the point where it was not worth it. Don't get me wrong, you could have probably taken a massive building in comparison and shrunk it into a diorama, and it would have looked completely fine from every single aspect of detail. The only problem is you are limited to your tools. Can you imagine having to draw this little speck that's less than a pixel on a feather when that pixel is already quite large? Another piece that I sort of suffered with this issue was many years ago when I did my Darth Vader piece. As I was drawing the Death Star, and I'll try and provide a picture for it somewhere around here right now. As I was drawing the Death Star, I noticed that the pixels for the lights was way too big. If I had a bigger Death Star to draw, I could have made those sources of light even smaller, which would have made it more realistic. But because of the limitations of the document or the canvas that I was working with, the DPI wasn't big enough, and the pixels per inch was not big enough either. So the more pixels you have in per inch of a canvas, the more you're able to work with, the higher the resolution, but the more demand it requires on the software. Now, I don't know about you, but I have an iPad Pro. It's the 2022 model. It's the M2 model, and it's a powerful piece of kit already from the get-go. But it's not as powerful as something like a proper drawing tablet is. It can handle a lot, but it can't handle to ridiculous levels of pixels per inch or dots per square inch, purely because you're dealing with such a powerful bit of kit in such a small form factor. Obviously, Apple have their own priorities. Having a powerful bit of software is a priority, but it's not like something like a proper drawing tablet is. It's like comparing a PS5 to a Nintendo Switch. It's, you know what I mean? That comparison is probably the best one I can give right now, because obviously a PS5 is massive, a PC even greater, and the more space that you have to work with, the more software, the more hardware you have to work with, the better the program, the better the resolution, the better the final piece. Now, I've gone down the rabbit hole long enough when it comes to that, but I think you get the idea. It's too much, and you need to think of other methods where you can give the same effect without having to compromise on a large amount of detail that will go unnoticed. Stopping is a really hard thing to do. Knowing when to stop as an artist is a very hard thing to do. One that you will learn? Yes, most certainly. The more you draw, the more you'll learn it. If you haven't got a grasp of it just yet, you will understand it, and you will know your limit when you reach there. One that will go away? Absolutely not. I am still learning when to stop right now. And it's difficult. Let me tell you, it's extremely tough. But this was the dilemma that I had to face when drawing Death and Dust and everything else. But all the extra effects that I've placed, from the glow in the background around the silhouette of the character, from the smoke-like effect that I was giving Dust. Again, if you've played the Darksiders franchise, you'll know that Dust is kind of embodied in this sort of smoke effect almost. The same goes for Death, but again, if I had implemented that smoke effect on Death himself, it would have become way too complicated. And again, the purpose of this piece was to draw Death in his default form, in his basic form. And in his basic form, he doesn't have those kind of effects. So I thought to leave it for now, to not implement it. But Dust usually does. Not all the time, like death, but sometimes does. And I thought that would have made the piece for him, for Dust, pop out that little bit more and draw some attention towards Dust, so kind of evening out the whole canvas. If I hadn't have done that for Dust, your focus would have been for Death only. If I had have done that overboard for Dust, your focus would have been too much on him. The purpose of this canvas and this piece, this project, was to illustrate Death, Dust, and everything that he represents equally. None would prioritize one or the other, and that is what I had to think about when illustrating this piece. Now, over time, you'll get to the point where this will become second nature. This will become easier. Fortunately, I've reached that point after many years of drawing. I've been drawing since the age of 4. Almost 6 years of drawing anatomy and everything else that I've practiced. So I still have a long way yet to go. I've only been deeply studying and illustrating in this way for the past 5+ years, nearly 6 years. Since 2017, roughly. Actually, no, it's been 6 years, yeah. Since 2017, it's been 6 years. Coming on 7, so 6+ years. But give it time, be patient, practice, even if it's small, practice, and you will honestly achieve more than you know. So this is the final piece of Death, Dust, and just everything that I love about Darksiders 2. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as well as the work that I produced. And who knows, maybe this might become a digital print. Let me know what you all think in the comments down below if you wish for me to make this into an available digital print in the future. But until then, I'll catch you on the next one. Keep drawing. Even if you're in a moment of drought, do not lose hope. Keep that spark alive. And I'll see you in the next one.